Hello and welcome to the Sprint 81 review. This was a regular 2-week sprint, and next one is in 2 weeks. Next slide, please. So I'll go over the overview. Dan will give us an update on the UI. Bronagh, Adam, and Rich will update us on providers. Tina on Automate, Greg T on Platform, Alberto on the REST API, and Chris on documentation. Next slide. All right, so we had 408 PRs merged this sprint across 89 repos. As you can see there, almost a quarter were in the integration test that the QE team works in pretty much. There was also almost 20% of changes in the classic UI. And that purple on the left, is that really VMware there? Wow.
No, that's all other repos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so and then 16% down in the main repo, the ManageIQ repo, and then everything else, those are kind of the three big chunks.
Yeah, they don't give you many choices with the colors when it gets like this.
We're busy, but we weren't that busy.
Good.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. All right, so close to the Gaprindashvili release, kind of the count went down, and now since then the count has been growing steadily on the number of pull requests merged. Next slide, please. As you can see here, when we were trying to finalize the release, I think we were at almost half were bug fixes. Now bug fixes are around 30%, enhancements are 36%, and the rest of the areas also had healthy doses of merged PRs. Next slide, please. And as far as the health of the various repositories, not too many changes here. I see the Azure one had doubling of the number of code smells. I don't know if that's indicative of anything. But other than that, it seems like everything is pretty steady there. Next slide, please. Over to Dan on the UI.
Thanks, Oleg. All right, so in the UI area, basically looking at the three repos, although I just realized we should probably add in the V2V UI repo because there's a lot of work going on there. Maybe next time. Across all the repos, total bugs. You can see the enhancements are getting a little bit higher. Putting in some enhancements that'll probably push back to the G release, which is pretty cool. And bugs went down a little bit, so really just collecting up bugs from the actual reports from the G release. Some of those bugs there listed. Found out that the timeline screen just wasn't working at all. That got fixed. The RBAC filtering was not being used in some of the areas. A couple of the networking areas, the router screen, the floating IPs, as well as the users and tenants when you're creating chargeback reports, was not being filtered for the specific user that's logged in. Some of the PDF screens weren't working in the physical area; those got fixed. Looks like a storage manager delete got removed, and that got put back. And also some of the actions on the physical server screens were broken, so those are fixed as well. Next screen, some enhancements. What we did was realize that you could filter these types of objects, the playbooks, repos, and credentials from Ansible, but you couldn't tag them. So we added in the tagging, made sure the filtering was working properly. While Hilda was in there, she also noticed that the view selectors and default views were not there just for the repos. The other two had it, so got those added. And for customization, ever since the UI split from the main repo, customization has been kind of difficult, so we found a relatively easy way to at least add some ability to change the style inside ManageIQ by adding a custom CSS file in the public folder so that you can override any styles you want. That's it on the UI. I think providers is next.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to share an update on the public cloud providers. Adam will speak about infrastructure providers, and Rich will update us on SmartState Analysis. Slide, please. The most merged pull requests this sprint came from the VMware provider. followed by the overt and the kubevert providers. Next slide, please. This was a very strong sprint for the Azure provider. Ladislav knocked out a full implementation of graph refresh this sprint, which was incredible.
Cool.
Yeah. So this brings time and memory optimizations, a much more concise interface for developers to work with. It paves the way for a more straightforward targeted refresh implementation. It's disabled by default, but this can be enabled in advanced settings.
Awesome.
Slide, please. So Ladislav, Dan, and Tom also knocked out targeted refresh for Azure this sprint. So this is an event-driven refresh strategy where details of a single target are fetched and processed instead of the entire provider. So now a new instance will appear in ManageIQ within 15 to 20 seconds after deployment. Without targeted refresh, a new instance would appear after a full refresh is complete, which could take 45 minutes or more. So as of this sprint, the 8 target types listed on the slide are supported. I expect more target types will be supported in Sprint 82. Next slide, please. And I should add before I move on to Google that given the volume of code that was implemented this sprint, some duplicated code crept in and some methods were too long, and that was reflected in the health report. So we're actively refactoring those areas. On to Google. So like Azure and Amazon, the Google Ad Provider screen had a region drop-down, which was required. Yet this was completely ignored by the backend, and this created confusion because the end user thought they were adding a provider for a single region, yet inventory was gathered for all regions. So Tom removed the regions drop-down this sprint. Over to Adam.
Thank you. So on the OpenStack side, they updated their tests, specifically the event parser, to switch over to the more standard include metric for RSpec now that our have attributes was removed. I believe almost every provider did this as well. They also added the delete method for templates, which are OpenStack image deletes. On the overt side, now graph refresh is enabled by default, and that's expected to be pulled back for the next Kubernetes release. They support VM unregister, which is the equivalent of deleting the VM without actually deleting the underlying storage. This has been supported for VMware for a long time, and now Overt added this as well, since that's one of the retirement options. They also now provide max memory, which is an Overt-specific configuration parameter during reconfigure. This not passing this led to some issues on newer Overt types. And next slide. The vCloud team had the majority of the VMware pull requests this sprint. They did extensive enhancements for VM provisioning, which Miha will hopefully provide a demo for after this. They also added support for VMware snapshots, so they're now shown in the UI. You can delete and you can revert snapshots in the cloud. And Miha, if you're ready for demo, if you want to share your screen.
Yes. Let me just hit the button. Can you see the Google Chrome?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the vCloud supports something called VApp templates. I'm gonna demonstrate how we can provision such a VApp template, as you can see here, through ManageIQ. The VApp template has 2 virtual machines, the web virtual machine with 2 network ports. One is connected to some external network called Red Hat Private Network, and another network port is connected to just the VApp network called localhost, and the database virtual machine is on this same network. Okay, and then if I go to the service catalog and provision it as a user, okay, I can order such a VApp template, but not just order it, I can quite heavily customize it. So there's a bunch of things I can customize. First, the VApp name. and then where to provision it to, and then I can tell whether I want it to have deployed and powered on. I'll turn this off just for the demo. It will go faster. And then there's a section to configure VApp networks. Here I have two VApp networks, the Red Hat Private Network 43, which is connected to some other VDC network in bridge mode, and then I have the local host VApp network, which I can customize. Like I can specify the gateway and netmask and DNS. And when I'm satisfied with the networking configuration, I can scroll down to the virtual machine customization. So as seen before, I have the database virtual machine, and I can like rename it, and I can specify my own host name here. And also I can customize the hardware, number of CPUs, cores per socket, memory, and also some guest customization things like administrator password, and I can decide whether I want the user to be prompted to require password on first login. And then for each disk that this virtual machine has, I can specify the size. I can increase the disk size, like from 4 gigs to 40. Validation sometimes doesn't work immediately. That's a bug. I don't know why. But and then for each network port on this virtual machine, I can decide what network does it connect to. Like I'm gonna just customize here that I connect in manual IP allocation mode, and I'm gonna specify a static IP for this virtual machine like this. Okay, and I can do the very same for the web virtual machine, but I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna hit submit. And yeah, now the VApp template is being provisioned with my customizations, and it should the new VApp should appear on the virtual cloud director shortly. So when the administrator approves and all this, it takes like 10 seconds for Automate to start working, usually. And now it's provisioning, and when it's provisioned, I'm gonna show you that the customization actually was applied. So you can see the name of the virtual machine was applied, and then now it's provisioned. And if I go to the VM properties and see the host name is also applied, and in the hardware section, I customize the disk size, it's applied, and then the network interfaces here, they have, basically what I specified there is applied. And also in the guest customization, we have what we wanted. And yeah, thank you. That was the VApp provisioning with customization integrated into ManageIQ.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Rehab. And that's it for on-premise providers. Over to Rich.
Okay. All right. This sprint for SmartState, we addressed a number of issues. A couple of them common for all provider types. We had issues with running SmartState on VMs that were French localized, and when usernames and certain characters that did not appear to map to UTF-8 would fail during SmartState analysis. So we resolved that. The second one might actually be VMware specific. Adam added this. Evidently, when you have a feature that creates and deletes snapshots, sometimes you have the need to ensure that it's deleting only the snapshots that it created. And this additional logging will help us make that determination going forward. We had an issue with SCVMM. If file shares were on if the storage was on a file share as opposed to a LUN, it would fail, and we resolved that. And that's it for SmartState. Next slide. Tina?
Yes, good morning. We had 14 PRs merged this sprint. Bill Wheat changed the transformation plan request type to backend to exclude it from the service request page and changed the plan request description to the plan name for the migration UI. Bill enabled retirement for Ansible Tower. Previously, only embedded Ansible retirement was supported. A small but important change was made for the logging the creation of request tasks. The message was issued prior to the quota check, so it appeared as though the request tasks were created when they weren't due to a quota denial. The log message now gets generated after the quota check. Next slide, please. We resolved a provisioning issue where user message set during request approval was interfering with user messages set in task processing. The issue was caused by user message getting copied from the request to the task at task creation. Removing the user message from the task resolved the issue. And finally, the embedded methods enhancement was added in the G release. 2 automate model attributes were added to support the enhancement. For backward compatibility, Madhu modified the automate domain export to remove these new attributes when empty. Without this change, exporting domains to older versions would result in an import failure. Next slide, and over to Greg.
All right, thanks, Tina. So on the platform side, we had 40 PRs merged and pretty even split between enhancements and bugs this go around. So some of the highlights, Libor did a fix to RBAC for user and eligible tagging for tenants. This is related to the stuff that Dan talked about for the front end. It showed up in the chargeback reports where a user could see all the tenants when he should only see certain ones, depending on what tenant he's in. Same thing with the groups and users. Also, I think Dan mentioned that Libor added RBAC and tagging support to Ansible repos as well. Yuri fixed an issue with emailing a report where if the recipient list was too long, it would not send the report to the rest of the list. This actually stems from an old bug in Rails going back many years where we had to split the list and it kind of gotten forgotten. So that's been cleaned up. And there was a fix also to scoping the default zone to the current region. There was a bug where if you added a new appliance would come online in the global region, it may pick the default zone in the wrong region and actually prevented that thing from being visible in the configuration page. And then there was a fix to the service UI chargeback generation. There was an issue when services that can be named the same, we let that happen, and we basically one of them would get chargeback generation, the other one wouldn't. And Libor did that fix. I'm sorry, Jillian did that fix. Libor did a fix to calculate the subtotals for hours of existence on metering reports. So we had the hours of existence for managed resource, but they were not getting included in the subtotals. And the last one there is Jillian removed the database maintenance from the appliance console. In previous sprints, she had moved the reindexing and auto-vacuuming stuff out of shell scripts and actually into the application with the regular scheduler, and it's configured through the advanced configuration. And that's it for platform. Next slide. Alberto.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, good. So for the API, the one bug fix that came in, Jillian did that fix. So when users are ordering the services from service catalogs, they may not have enough permission to view the associated ordered dialog from the catalog service. So we just have to make sure we have the right role identifier for both. Next slide, please. Okay, so we needed to add support for container objects. That's a new primary collection API containers and the standard gets of the collection, the resource, as well as bulk query action for those. Next slide, please. Okay, so Jillian did an enhancement where we now expose the pose and resume action providers. So we have parity with the UI. So we have the both pose and resume actions, equivalent disable and enable methods in the model. So standard signatures, the post on the resource for the pose action, as well as the collection for the bulk action pose, and the same for the resume actions. Next slide, please. Okay, next enhancement. Yep, so we needed the ability to delete data stores. So that's being done asynchronously, and the standard action result signature with the task reference. And that's essentially the post on the data stores resource for the delete action, or we can do bulk deletes of multiple data stores, as well as the individual HTTP delete method. Next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, we needed, there was a RFE to expose a couple of additional sub-collection to providers and hosts. So here, Jillian did the adding the folders, the networks, and LANs to providers, as well as LANs for the hosts, and the standard get signatures for all of these as shown below. Querying, all folders, for example, or an individual folder. Same thing with networks, LANs, and the LANs for the hosts. Next slide, please. Yes, and also this enhancement was in the works for a while. So Jillian did this one where we needed the ability to kick off the queuing the chargeback reports on services. So we support that for single and bulk requests, as well as a standard action result with task reference for that, and standard signature post API services on the resource or the bulk on the collection. And that's it for the rest. Next slide, please.
Hi, for documentation in Sprint 81, we had a total of 23 PRs merged, 17 of which were enhancements. The remaining 6 were bugs. The highlights among those PRs were we added some instructions on choosing the correct vSphere image. We corrected some instructions on adding a worker appliance, updated the mem limit parameters, corrected order of instructions for configuring a network. We updated procedures for adding OpenShift containers provider to configure image inspector settings for OpenSCAP. And we added info on VM operations and the VM dashboard to the self-service UI. That's it.
Okay, and with that, Sprint 81 comes to a close, and we'll be back in 2 weeks for Sprint 82. Thanks, everyone.